So you're making a beauty panel to cover up an amplifier, some subwoofers, or another piece of car audio gear in an install. Using a plain flat insert can be easy enough, but how can we quickly add some intriguing detail and design to your beauty panel? In this video, we're going to cover an installation technique that only takes a few minutes to add, but can result in a far more interesting and unique custom install. Hey guys, I'm Mark, welcome to CarAudioFabrication. Let's dive on into this fabrication technique video and get started. So since I'm making a beauty panel to show you guys some fabrication techniques, I wanted to make it for a piece of gear. That way it applies to a real situation, and we're gonna be making it for this here. This is the Epicenter from show sponsor AudioControl. Now this is no ordinary Epicenter. This Epicenter is from a limited run batch of the 1 million strong limited edition. Every Epicenter in this batch is actually numbered out of 5,000, and as you can see, this is number 000 of 5,000. There's actually 3 different 0000s. This is a prototype model, super cool of AudioControl to send that over. A big shout out to Chris Bennett and the whole AudioControl team. If you guys aren't familiar with what an Epicenter does, let me tell you about it real quick. You can see that the Epicenter connects between our source unit and our amplifier, and if we have an EQ crossover or DSP in the system, it connects in front of that as well. The Epicenter detects bass harmonics and then digitally recreates the underlying fundamental for the incredible punch and impact of live music, reproducing heart-stopping, musical, and natural sounding bass. The reason this is called the 1 million strong edition is they've actually sold over 1 million Epicenters now. This is based upon the original design, but they've also recently released the Epicenter Micro. The Micro has the same great features, but adds OEM integration features as well. I'll be making a full video about these coming up. So I think sometimes it helps to see the finished project here first before we start making it. There's a lot of advanced techniques here. Let's get started with making these shapes in a musical montage. So let's get caught up on what we've done with all the fabrication pieces so far. So first of all, I got the Epicenter mounted to my baseboard. Now this could be whatever device you're installing. It could be mounted to a subwoofer enclosure, mounted to the floor, or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to have this shape like this. I just did that because I'm going to be using this as a demonstration panel. And in the meantime, I've also cut these spacer blocks that will allow me to have a piece of wood up here that's going to be floating up above the cutout of the Epicenter. So that piece looks something like this. Now I intentionally made the cutout larger than I needed to because I know I'm going to have other pieces on the inside here, and we'll be doing the cool router techniques to that insert, but I do like making this inside hole a little bit bigger if need be, because that way it gives me a little bit more serviceability without completely taking apart the panel. Now on top of this baseboard here, I did make another 1/2 inch thick complete cutout that will go around the outside. And the point of this piece is it just gives me an outside perimeter to capture that inside insert so that it is in fact an insert and can't come out of the outside. Now these templates do have a 3/16 gap between them from this outside shape to the inside shape, and that's intentional so that it's sized for if you were to wrap this piece with carpet and this piece with carpet, but I want to tighten up the gap. Those of you that have watched some of my more advanced fabrication videos know how important these gaps are. I'm always stressing that you want these gaps to be perfect, so when I copy the outside of this shape, you're going to see me using this router bit here, and the reason for that is I can expand off of that outside surface a little bit and leave a little bit of extra material in order to shrink up that gap. On the inside of this insert, I want to make sure that I fill up the rest of this gap here. So when I cut out the hole, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take 2 of these straight templates. I'm going to template tape everything together to make that rectangular hole in the middle there so you can still see the epicenter, but the rest of this stuff is going to be covered. That insert is looking really good, and now we obviously have the edges of the exposed area there before covered up, and we've got the epicenter framed out. Now I do want to add a little bit more detail inside this pocket, so I'm just going to make this shape again to go inside here. So that was easy enough. I just made that inside ring using that inside template, and I also in the meantime used a chamfer bit just to add a little bit more geometry around the inside here and the outside of this ring and the inside of this ring. So this is looking pretty slick, but before we do get to adding that geometry on the inside here, I do want to make one more profile cut pass around the outside here. I'm just going to use a roundover bit on that hard edge. So now that we have our panel all prepped, we know that the piece that we want to add some additional detail to is this piece right here. So let's get this stuff out of the way, grab that piece. So the tools that we're going to use to add some additional detail here, first of all, we're going to need a router. Obviously the router is pretty common for what we're doing with all the custom fabrication, but there's also a couple of other unique tools. We're also going to want the router guide from Mobile Solutions, and there's different ones depending on your model of router. In this case, I have the Makita XTR01Z, so I'm using that version of the router guide. I'll show you attaching to that in a second. We're also going to be using the template guide system. This has several different bushings that attach to the base of the router, and in our case the common one that we're going to be using is the 1/2" OD, and the reason for that is that 1/2" OD fits into this center slot on the straight guides and the arc guide system for Mobile Solutions as well. Also in the template guide system are several different really small router bits that we're going to use to make our grooves on the panel. I really like this bit here. This is the flat chamfer bit, so I think that's what we're going to be using on this panel. So what's cool about these arc guides is we can basically make 3 lines by just sticking this down one time. Now obviously if we wanted to make more lines, we could by adjusting this piece in several different places, sticking it multiple times, or another good option if you're trying to create multiple lines is to use the Mobile Solutions Smart Ruler. I'd encourage you to not get carried away though, because sometimes just 2 or 3 lines can really go a long way, especially on a small panel like this. So I'm just going to be doing 3 lines, and rather than doing a straight line, I think what I want to do is use one of the arc guides. Now these vary in radius from a 20-inch radius all the way up to a 36-inch radius, depending on the side of the template that you use. I want a nice large radius here, and I think I'm going to lay it something like this and stick it on and then do 1, 2, 3 different passes. Now we want this workpiece to stay put where it's at while we're using the router on it, so I'm literally going to take some template tape, put it on the back side, and stick this to the table. Now because we're going to be having the arc come in at kind of an odd angle here, it can be difficult to make sure that we get the exact same angle on this side unless you know a cool little geometry trick. What you can do is, since this piece here is perfectly mirrored upon this center line, you can take this little indexing line, you can line it up with a center line, a mirror line that you've drawn on your part by measuring out. You could do something like this, line up that indexing line with the point that line comes in contact with this outer edge, and then you could make sure that this edge here lines up with another indexing line that's centered on this circle part. As long as you do something like that and you have 2 points that you are lining up on this piece, you can then flip it over and do the same thing on both sides. So I carefully lined up that template and stuck it into position. And the next thing I need to do here is I'm going to take one of my router bushings and I'm going to add it to the base here. This is that 1/2 inch bushing that I was telling you about. And then we can use the threaded ring on the inside to secure it. Next, we'll add that router bit into the base. Now this is something we definitely want to check before we turn on the router. Make sure that that bit is not going to come in contact with the bushing. It should freely flow inside of there. The other thing to remember is you're going to have a template on the surface. So right now that bit is obviously way too far out. Let's kind of eyeball it from the side here, and we can see how far that bit is going to go into the surface if we look at the edge of the template there. And once we're happy with that, we can lock the base in position. For the first pass, I recommend not having that bit out too far. It's better to err on the side of having it too shallow of a cut, because obviously you can always readjust and make another cutting pass that's a little bit deeper if you need to. So I'm gonna get the battery connected to the router here and make this first cutting pass. And we wanna make sure on this first pass, we're only going to do the inside there, the middle. This definitely wasn't that deep, so I'm going to adjust and make it a little bit deeper. It's kind of hard to see right now because the template's in the way, but this is going to look pretty good. Resist the urge to pop the template off right now, because while the template is still attached, we want to make sure that we get these nice coincident circle cuts on this cut here and here as well. Before we make the next 2 cuts though, the router has a tendency to want to tip over when it's not on the middle and supported by both sides of the template. It kind of wants to tip out like that. So what we can do is we can use the new router guide. What this does is when we start making that cut, it's going to make sure that we have a nice surface that's going to flow along with the cut here so that the router can't tip over. So here it is, guys, the finished panel. I love the way this turned out, and imagine how this will look wrapped in vinyl or painted. These small details we added really give the panel a clean and intriguing look, much better than just some flat inserts. Now don't forget, if you want to optimize the bass performance for your subwoofer system in your vehicle, definitely check out the Epicenter from show sponsor AudioControl. You can learn more at the link down in the video description. A special thanks to them, along with Anthony, Mike, Mo, Jerry, Marcos, William, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. Big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible, and thank you for watching.